And welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. This is another episode of Cottage Talk full of media buzz. This one is entitled, Let's Make a Deal. Reason for the title is that there are these media stories out there involving Fulham, obviously with Alexander Mitrovic. Could he be leaving? And then, of course, there are now news stories linking Fulham to a couple of strikers, which is interesting. So there's a lot out there. So that's why I decided to say, let's make a deal. Is a deal imminent in regards to Mitro going someplace else? Is Fulham bringing in a striker? I'm not sure, but I'm going to analyze and discuss three stories that are in the media, and we'll take it from there. The second half of the show, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on Brighton Hove Albion. I don't want Fulham to emulate Brighton Hove Albion, and I'll explain that at the end of the show. I just have some thoughts on it. I like how Fulham are built. I have feelings on Brighton Hove Albion. I respect what they've done. I just don't want Fulham to do what they've done. So I'll share that in the second half of the show. Before we get going, as always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. Let's get to it. Let's start with the information that came out yesterday. There was an onslaught of journalists out there talking about the Mitro situation and could he be on his way to Al Hilal. So I'm going to share the tweet from Fabrizio Romano, which came out actually yesterday, and I'll share my thoughts on it. This is what he tweeted out. Understand Al Hilal are finalizing move to sign Alexander Mitrovic. Deal now imminent, waiting for final approval as formal bid has been sent. Mitrovic agreed terms with Al Hilal in July, and he's just waiting for Fulham's green light to make it happen in the next hours. Okay. So that is the tweet from Fabrizio Romano. Like I mentioned, I am recording this on Thursday. This came out on Wednesday, and there have been other tweets from other journalists basically saying that for Mitro to go to Al Hilal going to happen. It's imminent. Well, it hasn't happened yet. Doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. Do I buy the story? Yes, I buy the story. There has been so many journalists out there writing about this, so I'm buying the story. But the word here that really just stands out to me is green light, which tells me that as of yesterday, the green light has not been given for the deal to go through. Now, it could still go through. So we still have to wait and see how this all plays out. But if I go by what I'm reading in the media, it looks more likely than not that Mitro will be leaving Fulham and going to Al Hilal. But nothing's been done as I'm recording this show. I don't want it to happen. I'm going to be on record as saying I do not want this to happen. I think Fulham have been resolute up to this point, and I've given them credit for that. If they give in to the pressure, I will mention that, and I'm not in favor of it. But you know what? It's a business. Everyone has a price. I'll be upset about it, but it's business. Things happen. So we'll see if ultimately Fulham sells Mitro. And like I said, if you go by the media reports, it sounds like it's more likely than not, but only time will tell to see how that all plays out. And as I mentioned, I just don't want Fulham to do this. But if they do it, and we move on. So that's going to lead to talk about Fulham now being linked to two strikers. And they could be linked to more strikers, but this also kind of makes you feel that maybe something is going on if you go by the media buzz here. So let's start with the Daily Mail and Simon Jones. He's had a few articles on this. This was the most recent one that I have. And it is Fulham step up interest in Arsenal's Folarin Balogun, but the clubs are still £10 million apart in their valuations of the striker, with the Gunners holding out for £45 million. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from this and share my thoughts on this. I'm reading from the Daily Mail article. Fulham have stepped up their interest in Arsenal forward Folarin Balogun, but remain £10 million short of the North London club valuation. The Gunners are holding out for $45 million for the USA international after he enjoys a successful spell in France. Mikel Arteta's side had initially wanted $50 million before lowering their price tag. However, the Cottagers are only willing to pay a maximum of $35 million. Balogun notched 21 goals in 37 league appearances in 2022-2023 season. Okay, so that's that article. Okay, so do I buy the story that Fulham are potentially interested in Folarin Balogun? I buy the story. I think that there is something to it. The issue I have with it is that I think this would be a huge gamble for Fulham Football Club to pay even £35 million for this player. He is a U.S. international, so you would think I would be all for this. I just don't know if I buy that he is really the real deal at this point in his career. And I think it's a lot of money to do this. It is a gamble. It is a complete gamble to do this. I think that he has a lot of potential, but you are banking on his potential. And I'll just say it one more time. If they decide to do this, I think this is not a sure thing. And it is a gamble. But I understand why they would have to gamble if they have made the decision, which we don't know at this point, to sell Mitrovic. They need to sign someone. Balogun makes sense. But as people are looking at the amount that they're offering at this point, it's a negotiation. Fulham are not going to come in with their strongest offer. Maybe they'll meet somewhere in the middle. I don't know. And I don't know if this is going to happen. But I'm just talking about the story that's in the Daily Mail today. I do give it some weight if Fulham have decided to sell Mitro. But we don't know. And we'll have to see how this all plays out with Mitro and Fulham being linked to these strikers. Now, here is a story in the Boot Room, and I'm going to read from it, and it actually talks about journalist Dean Jones. So here's from the Boot Room. The title was, as well as Hudson-Odoi, another sensational Chelsea player could end up at Fulham. Journalist. And the journalist happens to be Dean Jones, who I know and comes with a lot of good sources. So this is what Dean Jones says. This is from the article from Charles Jones on the Boot Room. Callum Hudson-Odoi is reportedly closing in a move to Fulham, while according to Dean Jones, speaking on the done deal show, Fulham are also having a look at Armando Broja. Jones shared what he knows about the sensational Chelsea star. Quote, this is Dean Jones, quote, I think we will get a good gauge on it, whether or not Broja will be able to speak to other clubs or not. That would be the one to make way. Right now, with Nicholas Jackson, you're thinking Broja is the main backup and alternate option there. West Ham have had an eye on Broja for a while, and Fulham are having tentative steps around looking at the Broja perspective, unquote, Dean Jones says. So that is about Broja. And Broja actually had a good stint at Southampton. He got hurt. He was hurt for the majority of last season, so he's coming off of an injury. I don't know if I like this situation for Fulham, a player coming off of an injury like this. Do I buy the story? Yes, I buy the story because Fulham should be interested in all their options. So Dean is well connected, and if Dean is saying this, then I'm going to buy the story. The question is, should Fulham be looking at this player? They absolutely should. And they should also be looking at Balogun. They should be looking at all striker options. But I will say this now. This is just my opinion. I think Fulham need to bring in a striker before they sell Alexander Mitrovic. If they've made up their mind that they're going to do it, I think they need to have someone in place before they sell Mitrovic. That's just my opinion on it. I think they need it all in place before they greenlight any move for Alexander Mitrovic, which I hope that they don't greenlight. But if they do, I want them to have a player coming in the door. I think that's important. I think, again, put Fulham first. Get the player in. Many clubs do this. They get the player first before letting a player go. Why can't Fulham do this? So that's just my opinion on that. If they do sell Mitrovic, I want the striker in first. That's just how I feel about that. Okay. Coming up next, I'm going to share my thoughts on Brighton. Okay, to end this episode of Cottage Talk, I'm going to share my thoughts on Brighton Hove Albion. Now, I do have a lot of respect for what Brighton Hove Albion have done, what they've built. They have built a quality Premier League team. They should be commended for what they've done. I just don't like being this selling club. I don't want Fulham to become this selling club. Now, they've got it down to an art form. They've hit almost every time. But I just don't like that type of business model because I think eventually you're going to miss, and you're going to miss badly, and it might cost you being in the Premier League. So for me, you have to hit at a very high number. So far, Brighton Hove Albion are doing it. So I don't want Fulham to look at that. And I also think if you truly are ambitious, like I know Fulham are, like I know the Cons are, and I believe Marco is as well, I think you want to be thinking we need to be keeping our key players and we need to be building. Now, they might be forced in the Mitrovic situation, but beyond that, they shouldn't be selling Palhinha. They shouldn't be doing that. Palhinha is the best player. If you're going to make a choice between Palhinha and Mitrovic, I'm keeping Palhinha 10 out of 10 times if I have to choose. And if they're forced to sell Mitrovic, then that's a decision that they make, then that's a decision they make. But I don't want Fulham to be doing this on a regular basis the way that Brighton Hove Albion. I think you're getting yourself in this model of you have to hit all the time. And I want Fulham to do it the way that they're doing it right now. Does it frustrate me? Absolutely. Their business model, they are looking for good deals. But what I want them to do is to supplement that with 2 or 3 high-profile players every summer window. And I don't think that's asking a lot to prioritize upgrading with 2 or 3 marquee signings on the level of Palhinha. I think that's what they need to do. Then you have all these other types of signings. You have the free transfer like you do with Adama Traore. You're finding good deals. I'm all for finding the good deals, but I think you have to marry that with the marquee signings. That's what I want Fulham to do. In the case of Brighton Hove Albion, I respect what they do, but I just think at some point it's going to come back to bite them. It hasn't yet, and they get all kinds of praise for their business model. I get it. They deserve it. Brentford do something similar on a smaller scale. They have been very successful on doing it. But I don't want Fulham to do it. I want Fulham to build a club that can contend for Europe. And I think the best way to do that is to do it the way that I have just marked it out. Now, I understand financial fair play is a huge factor in this. But there are ways to do this financially to be able to make these signings. Can they make 2 or 3 signings, marquee signings every summer without selling? Probably not. But I don't think that they should be selling all of their best players like Brighton Hove Albion. I'm not against them selling one player that you can get a decent amount of money for a window, a summer window. So I am going to say that right now. I'm not against it, but I don't want it to be 2 or 3 of your best players. You should be holding on to your best players. I truly believe that as much as possible. Fulham have done that up to this point. We'll see what happens with the Mitrovic situation. If you look in Brighton Hove Albion, yes, they have been able to replace their players. But think about the players that they've let go and if they were able to keep the majority of them, where they might be to this day. Just think about it. I understand the business model. I just don't want Fulham to be Brighton Hove Albion. I want them to be Fulham. And I'll just leave it at that. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Cottage Talk. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. My name is Russ Goldman. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.